Hi everyone. Welcome to Lunar Sleeping Studio. Rain fell softly over Alexandria, the kind of rain that did not rush but lingered, tapping gently against stone rooftops and winding streets as if the night itself were breathing. The sea beyond the harbor murmured in low agreement, waves brushing the docks with tired patience. Lamps glowed like small moons along the streets, their light trembling on wet marble. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang once, then fell silent, and the city slowly exhaled into sleep. Inside the Great Library, the rain sounded different. It whispered through high windows and echoed faintly across endless halls lined with shelves that rose like quiet cliffs of knowledge. Scrolls slept in their niches, papyrus wrapped with care, ink holding the weight of centuries. The air smelled of parchment, oil lamps, and time itself. A single flame flickered on a wooden desk where a young man sat alone, his shoulders hunched, his fingers resting on a scroll he had not yet opened. He listened to the rain and sighed, a sound heavier than it should have been. All these words, he murmured, barely louder than the flame, and still I do not know what to do with my life. The library answered him with silence, the deep, patient silence that had heard countless questions before his and would hear countless more after. He leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the steady rhythm of rain slow his thoughts. His name was Elias, a copyist by trade, a scholar by desire, and a restless soul by nature. He spent his days copying the wisdom of others, yet his nights were filled with doubt, wondering whether knowledge alone could ever make him whole. Footsteps approached, unhurried, steady, as if they had all the time in the world. Elias opened his eyes to see an old man walking between the shelves, his robe simple, his hair silver, his presence calm in a way that made the air feel warmer. The old man carried no scroll, no lamp, yet seemed perfectly at home in the dim light. You sit as though the weight of every book rests on your chest, the old man said gently, stopping near the desk. Elias straightened, embarrassed. Forgive me. I did not hear you. That is because you were listening to yourself, the old man replied with a faint smile. The rain often helps us do that. Elias hesitated, then spoke honestly, his words spilling out as if they had been waiting for permission. I read every day. I write every day. I learn names, dates, ideas from distant lands. Yet when I look at my own heart, it feels empty. As if I am collecting light but never lighting a fire. The old man lowered himself onto a nearby bench, the wood creaking softly. Do you know why this place exists? He asked. To preserve knowledge, Elias answered quickly. To gather the wisdom of the world. Yes, the old man said, but also to remind us that wisdom is not the same as living. He reached out and touched the edge of a scroll. These words are doors. They are not the journey itself. Rain drummed a little louder against the windows, as if agreeing. Elias swallowed. Then what is the journey? The old man looked toward the high ceiling, where shadows moved like slow clouds. That is what many come here hoping to discover. Some leave with answers. Others leave with better questions. A long pause settled between them, comfortable and unforced. Elias felt his breathing slow, his thoughts becoming softer, less sharp. Did you find your journey? He asked quietly. The old man's smile faded into something deeper, tinged with memory. I am still walking it. Even at my age. Elias let that sink in. The idea was strangely comforting. The rain, the lamplight, the endless shelves, it all felt like a cocoon, holding him gently. Then perhaps I am not failing, he said. Perhaps I am just beginning. The old man nodded. Beginnings are often disguised as confusion. A distant thunder rolled over the sea, low and far away, and the flame on the desk trembled but did not go out. Elias reached for the scroll in front of him and finally unrolled it. The symbols seemed less intimidating now, less like commands and more like invitations. What should I read tonight? He asked. The old man stood, his joints protesting softly, and leaned closer. Read slowly, he said. And when the rain pauses between drops, listen. Sometimes the most important lessons are not written. Elias looked up, but the old man was already walking away, his footsteps fading into the vastness of the library. For a moment, Elias wondered if he had imagined the entire encounter, but the warmth remained, steady and real. He bent over the scroll and began to read, not with urgency, but with patience. Outside, the rain continued its gentle song, washing the city, the stones, the sleeping minds of Alexandria. And within the Great Library, a young man took the first quiet step toward understanding that knowledge, when held with humility and heart, could become wisdom. As the night deepened, Elias whispered to himself, I will learn not just to know, but to live, and the rain, soft and endless, carried his promise into the dark. Morning arrived quietly, as if it did not wish to disturb the thoughts left behind by the night. The rain had softened into a mist that clung to the air, turning the streets of Alexandria into silver pathways. From the library's tall windows, the city looked half awake, ships resting in the harbor like dreaming beasts, their sails damp and heavy. Elias stirred at the wooden desk, his head lifting slowly from his folded arms. A thin line of sunlight crept across the floor, touching the edge of a shelf and stopping just short of his feet. He blinked, confused for a moment, then remembered the night, the rain, the old man, and the feeling that had settled into his chest like a calm ember. He straightened and rolled the scroll closed with care. His fingers moved gently, as if the parchment might be listening. Good morning, he whispered, unsure why he felt the need to speak at all. The library responded with its usual hush, but it was no longer empty. Scholars had begun to arrive, their sandals soft against the stone, their murmured greetings floating like distant echoes. Lamps were being extinguished, replaced by daylight that filtered down from above, illuminating dust motes dancing in slow, lazy spirals. Elias rose and stretched, his back protesting after a night spent in stillness. As he gathered his things, his eyes searched the aisles instinctively, hoping to catch a glimpse of the old man. There was no sign of him. No silver hair, no calm presence, no bench still warm from use. Only shelves and shelves of knowledge standing in quiet patience. You look as though you spoke with a ghost, a voice said nearby. Elias turned to see Mara, another copyist, her arms full of scrolls, her expression curious and amused. She had ink-smudged fingers and eyes that noticed more than most. Did I? Elias replied, forcing a smile. You were smiling to yourself, she said, setting the scrolls down. Either you discovered something extraordinary, or you slept better than usual. Perhaps both, Elias said honestly. Have you ever felt that this place is alive? Mara raised an eyebrow. Alive? It's full of paper and dust. And ideas, Elias added. And questions. She studied him for a moment, then shrugged. Ideas don't keep you warm at night. Come. The head archivist wants today's copies finished before sunset. They walked together down a long corridor, their footsteps echoing in rhythm. As they passed towering shelves, Elias felt different, as if he were walking through a forest he had visited his entire life, but only now noticed the sound of leaves. Hours passed in steady work. Elias dipped his reed into ink, copying line after line with careful precision. Yet something had changed. Each word felt heavier, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. He paused often, rereading sentences, letting them settle before moving on. At midday, the library doors opened wider, allowing the sounds of the city to drift inside, vendors calling, distant laughter, the clatter of carts. Elias set down his reed and rubbed his eyes. Across the room, an elderly woman struggled with a stack of scrolls, her hands trembling slightly. Without thinking, Elias stood and crossed the room. "May I help you?" he asked. She looked up, surprised, then smiled with relief. "If you would be so kind." As he took the scrolls from her, she watched him closely. "You move as though you have somewhere important to be," she said. "I'm not sure I do," Elias replied. "But it feels wrong to hurry past people." The woman nodded slowly. "That feeling," she said, "is worth more than many books." Her words struck him with unexpected force. He returned the scrolls to their place and went back to his desk, his heart quietly alert, as if listening for something new. That evening, as the sun lowered and painted the walls gold, Elias stepped outside the library. The air smelled of wet stone and salt. A young boy sat near the steps, shivering, his clothes thin and damp. People passed without looking. Elias hesitated, then removed his cloak and draped it over the boy's shoulders. "It will be cold tonight," he said. The boy looked up, eyes wide. "Thank you," he whispered, clutching the fabric as if it were treasure. Elias walked away feeling lighter, though he now felt the chill himself. As he looked back at the library's grand doors, he understood something he had never read in any scroll. Knowledge gathered only for oneself was silent. Knowledge shared became warmth. That night, as clouds gathered again and the first drops of rain began to fall, Elias returned to the library not just as a reader, but as a listener to words, to people, and to the quiet pull of a life beginning to open. Rain returned before night fully settled, thin at first, then steady, stitching the sky and the city together in a soft gray veil. Elias walked the long corridor of his small room, barefoot on cool stone, the rhythm of drops outside matching the pulse in his chest. Sleep did not come easily. The day's small moments, Mara's curious glance, the old woman's words, the boy's grateful whisper kept circling his thoughts like gentle waves. He lit a small lamp and unrolled a scroll he had brought home, one he had copied himself years ago and barely remembered. The ink looked darker in the lamplight, the letters more alive. He began to read slowly, not searching for meaning, but allowing it to find him. Between sentences, the rain filled the silence, patient and forgiving. A knock sounded at the door. Elias froze. No one visited at this hour. The knock came again, softer, as if unsure it should be there at all. He opened the door to find a woman standing under the narrow awning, her cloak soaked, her face drawn with worry. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I was told you work at the library. My husband, he's ill. The physician says the knowledge we need may be in the old medical texts, but I don't know where to look." Elias hesitated only a breath. "Come in," he said. "You'll catch cold." She stepped inside, gratitude and fear mingling in her eyes. As she spoke, Elias listened not just to her words, but to the spaces between them, the pauses heavy with hope. He wrapped a dry cloth around her shoulders and extinguished the lamp. "The library is still open to those who serve," he said. "We'll find what you need." They walked through rain-slicked streets, the city quieter now, lanterns reflecting in shallow pools. Inside the library, the vastness felt different at night, more intimate, as if the walls leaned in to hear secrets. Elias led her through winding aisles, his memory guiding him more than signs. He found the shelf, then another, his fingers recognizing spines by touch. Hours passed unnoticed. They read, compared, debated. Elias copied passages, explaining what he understood and admitting what he did not. The woman watched him, astonished. "You speak as if these books are friends," she said. "They are," Elias replied softly. "But friends are meant to be introduced." When they finally left, dawn was breaking, the rain thinning into mist. The woman bowed deeply. "You may have saved a life," she said. Elias shook his head. "The books did," he answered, then paused. "We just listened together." Later that morning, Mara found him at his desk, eyes red with exhaustion, hands steady with purpose. "You look terrible," she said, then softened. "What happened?" He told her. She listened without interruption, then smiled in a way that made the room brighter. "So," she said, "the library is becoming a bridge." Elias considered the word. Bridge. It felt right. At midday, the old man appeared again, as quietly as a thought. He stood beside Elias's desk, watching him write. "You crossed water last night," the old man said. "I did," Elias replied, surprised at how easily the truth came. "And it wasn't frightening." The old man nodded. "Because you did not cross alone." A long silence followed, filled with scratching reeds and distant rain. "Is this the journey?" Elias asked at last. The old man's eyes crinkled. "One of its many roads." As evening approached, a troubling rumor spread through the hall. Ships delayed, tempers flaring, voices raised beyond the doors. Elias felt a subtle tightening in his chest, as if the rain carried a warning. He looked at the shelves, at the fragile scrolls, and felt a new kind of concern take root. That night, as the rain resumed its steady watch over Alexandria, Elias stayed late, walking the aisles, touching the shelves, listening. He understood now that the library was not merely a place to store the past. It was a living promise, one that required care, courage, and people willing to stand between knowledge and the storms of the world. And as thunder rolled far out to sea, Elias whispered a quiet vow into the vastness, unsure who might hear, but certain it mattered. The storm arrived without ceremony, slipping into the city like a heavy breath. By nightfall, the rain had thickened, drumming against roofs and shutters, washing the streets into winding rivers. Wind pressed against the library's tall doors, making them groan softly, as if the building itself were uneasy. Elias stood near a window, watching lightning briefly turn the harbor white. Each flash revealed ships tugging at their ropes, sailors moving like shadows. With every rumble of thunder, his unease grew, a feeling he could not name but could not ignore. Behind him, voices rose and fell in hurried conversation. "The southern quarter is flooding," someone said. "The docks may close by morning." Another replied, "If the unrest continues, people will look for someone to blame." Elias turned, his heart tightening. Blame for what? For hunger. For fear, Mara said, stepping beside him. Her voice was low, steady. When the city feels threatened, even wisdom becomes a target. They both looked toward the shelves, the countless scrolls resting in careful order. For the first time, Elias felt protective in a way that surprised him. Not possessive, but responsible, as one feels toward something fragile and precious. As the night deepened, a messenger arrived, soaked and breathless. He spoke urgently with the head archivist, whose face grew pale. Lamps were lowered. Doors were quietly barred. A decision settled over the library like a held breath. Elias found himself helping without being asked, moving scrolls away from lower shelves, lifting them to higher ground, securing shutters against the wind. His hands moved quickly, but his thoughts remained clear. The library had taught him patience, now it was teaching him readiness. In a far hall, the old man appeared, observing the flurry of motion with calm eyes. He caught Elias's gaze and nodded once, as if to say this too is part of learning. Later, as rain hammered the roof, a group of townspeople gathered at the library doors, voices raised in fear and anger. "Open!" someone shouted. "We need shelter." The archivist hesitated. "If we open the doors, we must," Elias said quietly, surprising even himself. "Knowledge means nothing if it does not serve people." Mara looked at him, searching his face. Then she nodded. The doors were opened, and soaked families poured in, clutching children, eyes wide with relief. The library changed instantly, whispers replaced by crying, the smell of wet wool and fear mixing with parchment. Elias guided people to dry spaces, shared water, calmed trembling hands. A child reached out to touch a scroll, and Elias gently covered it with cloth, smiling. "Some stories are for another time," he said. As the storm raged on, a sudden crack echoed through the halls. Water seeped in from a fractured window, dripping dangerously close to a low shelf. Elias rushed forward, heart pounding. He gathered scrolls, lifting them to safety as water crept across the floor. In that moment, lightning struck close, thunder exploding overhead. The library shuddered. A woman screamed. Elias froze, fear sharp and cold. Then a hand rested on his shoulder. The old man stood there, steady as stone. "Courage," he said simply, "is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to protect what matters." Elias nodded, breath trembling, and moved again. Others followed his lead. Together, they worked through the night, forming human chains, passing scrolls, blocking leaks, comforting the frightened. By dawn, the storm weakened, retreating into mist. The library stood scarred but standing. Exhausted people slept among the shelves, wrapped in borrowed cloaks. Elias sank onto a bench, rainwater dripping from his hair, his body aching, his heart full. He looked around at the sleeping city within the library walls and understood something new and heavy with meaning. Wisdom was not meant to hide from storms. It was meant to stand within them, offering shelter, direction, and hope. As sunlight crept back into Alexandria, Elias closed his eyes, letting the quiet after rain settle over him, knowing the journey ahead would demand even more but feeling, for the first time, ready to give it. Morning did not arrive with birdsong, but with tired breaths and the soft rustle of people waking among shelves of ancient thought. The rain had withdrawn into a pale haze, leaving behind the scent of wet stone and something deeper relief. Light filtered through damaged windows, laying thin gold lines across the floor where families lay wrapped in borrowed cloaks. Elias woke with a stiffness that reached into his bones. He sat up slowly, careful not to disturb a sleeping child nearby. Around him, the library felt altered, not harmed but awakened, as if it had learned a new way to breathe. Scrolls rested on higher shelves, protected, and people rested beneath them, safe. Mara approached, carrying a small cup of warm broth. "Drink," she said softly. "You didn't stop once last night." Elias accepted it, the warmth spreading through his hands. "Neither did you." She smiled faintly. "I learned from watching you." Before Elias could reply, raised voices echoed from the entrance hall. He stood, setting the cup aside, and walked toward the sound. A group of city officials had arrived, their robes dry and their expressions sharp. One of them gestured angrily at the scattered people. "This is not what the library is for," he said. "It is a place of order." Elias felt his chest tighten, but he stepped forward. "Order without compassion becomes fragile," he said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "Last night, this place saved lives." A murmur spread through the gathered people. The official frowned. "And one of the scrolls? The risk?" Elias met his gaze. "We protected them. Together. Knowledge survived because people did." Silence followed, thick and uncertain. Then an elderly man from the crowd spoke, his voice hoarse. "My grandson would have frozen outside. The library kept him alive." Another added, "And my wife." The officials exchanged looks. At last, one nodded curtly. "See that the halls are restored by evening," he said, turning away. As they left, tension drained from Elias's shoulders. He had not realized how hard he was bracing himself until the moment passed. The old man appeared beside him, as quietly as breath. "You spoke truth with courage," he said. "That will echo longer than thunder." The day unfolded in gentle labor. People cleaned, repaired, shared food. Elias helped reshelve scrolls, his movements reverent. A young girl followed him, asking questions about the symbols. He answered simply, watching wonder bloom in her eyes. By afternoon, the library returned to a semblance of calm. Yet something lingered, a warmth, a shared memory. Elias stood at a window, watching clouds thin over the harbor. "I'm afraid," he admitted quietly, sensing the old man nearby. "If storms grow stronger, if people grow angrier." The old man's voice was soft. "Then your choices will matter even more." Elias nodded. He understood now that his path would not be easy or safe, but it would be meaningful. As evening fell and the first stars appeared, he returned to his desk, unrolling a fresh scroll. Outside, the city settled, still damp but breathing. Inside, Elias began to write, not just copying words, but recording moments, kindness, courage. The rain had shown him that wisdom lives where knowledge meets action, and as night embraced Alexandria once more, he felt ready to continue walking that bridge, wherever it might lead. The rain did not return that night, but its memory lingered in the cool air, slipping through open windows like a quiet reminder. Alexandria slept in fragments, some deeply, some restlessly, while the library remained awake in its own way, holding the echo of shared footsteps and whispered fears. Elias worked late, his reed moving steadily across fresh parchment. He was not copying ancient words now, but shaping his own account of the storm, the faces he had seen, the choices made in moments when fear pressed close. His writing was careful, humble, as if he feared the truth might slip away if he hurried. A soft cough sounded nearby. Elias looked up to see a young man standing uncertainly at the end of the aisle. His clothes were playing, his eyes sharp with curiosity. "I heard you were the one who opened the doors," he said. "I wasn't alone," Elias replied. "What do you need?" "I want to learn," the young man said simply. "Not just letters. I want to understand how knowledge can matter." Elias felt a quiet spark. He gestured to a bench. "Sit. Tell me your name." "Jonah," the young man said, sitting, his hands clasped tightly. They spoke for a long while about fear, about hunger, about the strange comfort of rain. Elias shared what he knew and admitted what he didn't. Jonah listened with an intensity that reminded Elias of himself not long ago. As they talked, Mara passed by and paused, watching. Later, she leaned close to Elias and whispered, "You're becoming a teacher." Elias shook his head. "I'm just listening." She smiled. "That's what makes the best ones." Near midnight, the old man appeared again, his presence as steady as ever. He watched Jonah leave with gratitude shining in his eyes. "Seeds," the old man said. "You are planting them." Elias exhaled slowly. "I'm afraid of planting the wrong ones." The old man's gaze was kind. "You will. And you will learn from that too." A distant shout echoed from the streets, angry, then another. Elias stiffened. "The city is restless," he said. "Yes," the old man replied. "And restlessness seeks answers. Sometimes it seeks enemies." The words settled heavily. Elias felt the weight of the library pressing in, not as burden, but as trust. "If trouble comes," he said, "what should we do?" "Stand," the old man answered. "Not in defiance, but in service." As dawn approached, Elias closed his scroll and stretched, exhaustion pulling at him. He walked the aisles one last time, touching shelves lightly, as if reassuring them. Outside, the city began to stir, vendors setting up, ships creaking awake. Elias stepped into the early light, the sea air cool on his face. He realized then that his life was no longer confined to pages. It moved with people, with choices made in quiet moments. The rain had taught him to listen, the storm had taught him to act. And somewhere between night and morning, Elias understood that the journey he had longed for was no longer ahead of him, it had already begun, and others were beginning to walk it too. The day opened with a restless sky, clouds drifting low and heavy, though no rain fell. Alexandria felt unsettled, as if the storm had not truly left but merely changed its shape. In the market streets, voices rose more quickly than usual, and arguments sparked over small things: prices, space, pride. Elias noticed it as he walked toward the library. People moved faster, eyes sharper, patience thinner. He felt the city's tension like a tight string drawn too far. Inside the library, work continued, but conversations carried an edge. Jonah arrived early, greeting Elias with a respectful nod. "There's talk outside," he said quietly. "Some say the library is favored while others suffer." Elias closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had feared this. "Fear looks for reasons," he said. "And reasons often become accusations." By midday, a crowd gathered near the outer steps. Elias watched from a high window as gestures grew wide, faces flushed. Words drifted upward, broken and angry. Mara joined him, her expression grave. "They think we hoard knowledge," she said. "And food. And safety." Elias swallowed. "We must speak with them." Mara turned sharply. "Now?" "Yes," Elias said. His voice trembled only slightly. "Before fear hardens." They descended together, the sound of the crowd swelling as the doors opened. The air outside was thick with heat and suspicion. Elias stepped forward, hands open, his heart pounding. "We opened our doors because the storm left no other choice," he said, projecting his voice. "The library belongs to the city. It always has." A man shouted back, "Then why do we starve while scrolls are saved?" Elias nodded slowly. "Because scrolls cannot eat. But they can teach us how to endure, how to heal, how to build. If we lose them, we lose more than paper." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces softened, others hardened. Stones lay scattered at the edge of the street, a silent threat. The old man appeared beside Elias, unseen by the crowd, his presence grounding. "Speak from the heart," he murmured. Elias took a breath. "Last night, the library sheltered your children," he said. "Tonight, it can shelter your hopes. Let us work together." A long silence followed. Then a woman stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Will you teach us? Not just scholars, but all of us?" Elias met her gaze. "Yes," he said. "If you are willing to learn and to share." Slowly, the crowd dispersed, not convinced, but quieter. The tension did not vanish, but it loosened its grip. As evening fell, Elias returned to the library, exhausted. Jonah approached him. "You stood in front of them," he said. "You didn't run." Elias smiled faintly. I was terrified. Jonah nodded. So was I, but it helped. That night, clouds finally broke, releasing a light, cleansing rain. Elias stood beneath the library's eaves, listening to the familiar sound. He understood now that wisdom would be tested not in calm halls, but in uncertain streets. And as rain washed the city once more, Elias felt the fragile bridge he was building stretch further over fear, over anger, towards something that could still be saved. Rain softened the city overnight, rinsing dust from the stones and quieting the sharp edges of yesterday's anger. By morning, Alexandria moved more slowly, as if walking on thoughts that had not yet decided where to settle. The library doors opened to a different kind of crowd, smaller, hesitant, curious rather than furious. Elias noticed them first from his desk. A fisherman with rough hands lingered near the entrance. A woman with 2 children stood just inside the threshold, unsure whether to step further. They did not touch the shelves. They waited. Elias rose and approached, his movements unhurried. "You're welcome here," he said gently. The fisherman cleared his throat. "We were told there might be learning." "There is," Elias replied. "And listening." He led them to a wide table near the windows where light pooled kindly. He brought simple texts, diagrams, stories written in clear hand. The children leaned closer, eyes bright. The fisherman's fingers traced a drawing of the stars. "I've watched them all my life," he said quietly. "Never knew their names." "You don't need their names to feel guided by them," Elias said. "But knowing can deepen the wonder." Throughout the day, more people arrived. Mara helped organize space, offering smiles and steady presence. Jonah assisted eagerly, explaining letters, repeating patiently. The library breathed with a new rhythm, questions asked aloud, laughter breaking through the hush. By afternoon, fatigue crept in. Elias stepped aside, resting near a column, watching as others taught and learned without him. The old man stood nearby, observing with a knowing calm. "You see?" he said. "The bridge holds when many walk upon it." Elias smiled, though worry tugged at him. "For now." The old man's eyes reflected the lamplight. "For now is always where courage lives." As evening approached, a sudden shout echoed from outside. Elias stiffened. Through the open doors, a small group appeared, faces tight with resentment. One man pointed inward. "So it's true," he said. "You give freely to them and not to us." Elias stepped forward again, heart heavy. "There is no them," he said. "Only us." The man scoffed. "Easy words." Elias nodded. "Then stay. Learn. Question. Argue if you must. But don't destroy what can heal." Silence stretched. Finally, the man lowered his gaze and turned away, leaving uncertainty behind like a shadow. That night, as the last visitors departed, Elias and Mara sat on the steps, listening to rain begin again, light and patient. "Do you think it will last?" Mara asked. "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But I know this matters." Above them, the library stood, weathered and watchful. Elias felt both small and necessary, a single voice among many, yet part of something larger. As rain traced gentle lines down the stone, Elias closed his eyes, letting the sound steady him. He understood now that peace was not an end, but a practice, one lesson at a time, one open door at a time. The rain faded before dawn, leaving the city washed and pale, like a thought half-formed. Elias arrived early, the library doors cool beneath his palms as he pushed them open. Inside, the air held a quiet expectancy, as if the shelves themselves were waiting to see what would come next. He set out simple tablets and fresh reeds, arranging them not as a scholar might, but as a host preparing for guests. His hands paused when he noticed a crack along the stone floor near the southern wall, thin but spreading. He frowned, kneeling to trace it with his fingers. Storms leave marks, he thought. So do arguments. By mid-morning, the library filled again, not with crowds, but with a steady stream of individuals. A potter curious about numbers. A sailor wanting to understand winds. An old woman asking how to write her name. Elias moved among them, guiding, listening, letting others teach where they could. Jonah approached, worry etched on his face. Some scholars are unhappy, he whispered. They say the library is losing its purpose. Elias felt the weight of those words settle. Purpose. He walked to the center hall, gazing up at the towering shelves. Was purpose something fixed, or something revealed? The old man joined him, as if summoned by the question. What troubles you? He asked. Change, Elias said. And the fear of losing what makes this place sacred. The old man smiled softly. Sacred things endure by serving. Later that day, a heated argument erupted near the philosophy shelves. Two scholars debated fiercely, voices sharp. Nearby, a farmer watched, confused and intimidated. Elias stepped between them, raising a hand. Teach each other, he said, not to win, but to understand. The scholars fell silent, embarrassed. One sighed. We forget ourselves, he admitted. As dusk fell, shadows lengthened, and the library grew quiet once more. Elias stayed behind, alone, walking the aisles. He felt the weight of responsibility press harder now, not just to protect the library, but to guide its spirit. He paused at the crack in the floor again, noticing a small green shoot pushing up through stone, fed by rainwater. He smiled, a quiet, surprised joy filling him. Life finds a way, he thought. Even here. That night, as Elias wrote by lamplight, he understood a deeper truth: knowledge resists stagnation. It must move, adapt, reach outward, or it fractures. Outside, clouds gathered again, but Elias no longer feared the rain. He welcomed it, knowing that each drop tested the ground, and each test revealed what was strong enough to grow. The night carried a heavier silence than before, the kind that settles after too many thoughts have been spoken aloud. Elias remained in the library long after the lamps were lowered, walking slowly between shelves, his footsteps echoing like questions he could not yet answer. Outside, the wind stirred, restless, brushing against the stone as if searching for a way inside. He paused near a table where a scholar had left an unfinished argument scratched onto a tablet. The lines were sharp, confident, certain. Elias traced them with his eyes and felt a quiet sadness. Certainty, he was learning, could be as dangerous as ignorance when it refused to listen. A sudden sound broke the stillness, a faint crack, then another. Elias turned sharply. Somewhere deeper in the building, wood groaned under pressure. He moved quickly, heart pounding, following the noise to a narrow corridor rarely used. There, a support beam had shifted, weakened by moisture from the storm. Water seeped slowly along the base of the wall. Elias stood still, breathing carefully. Panic would not help. He fetched tools, worked patiently, reinforcing the beam, redirecting the leak. His hands ached, but his mind remained steady. When it was done, he leaned back against the wall, exhausted, listening to his own breath. "You are learning to hold weight," the old man said, appearing beside him. Elias managed a tired smile. "Sometimes I fear it will be too much." The old man's eyes were gentle. "Strength grows quietly. It is not announced." The next day brought troubling news. A shipment of grain had been delayed. Prices rose. Tempers flared again. By afternoon, angry voices gathered near the library steps once more. This time, Elias felt no rush of fear, only resolve. He went out to meet them, Jonah and Mara at his side. "We cannot fill empty bellies with words," Elias said plainly. "But we can plan, share, and support one another." A man shouted, "Plans won't feed my children tonight." Elias nodded. "Then come inside. We'll write to merchants together. We'll calculate fair shares. We'll make sure no one is forgotten." The crowd hesitated. Slowly, one by one, they followed. Inside, the library transformed again, not into a shelter, not into a school, but into a place of coordination and care. Tables filled with lists, voices softened into cooperation. Elias moved among them, guiding without commanding, listening more than speaking. By evening, solutions were imperfect but real. People left tired, but less angry. As the doors closed, Elias sank onto the steps, watching the sky darken. Clouds gathered, promising more rain. He felt the ache in his bones, the weight in his chest, but beneath it all, a steady certainty grew. He was no longer searching for his purpose. He was living it, moment by moment, choice by choice. When the first drops fell again, Elias did not flinch. He let the rain touch his face, cool and honest, and whispered into the dark, not as a plea, but as a promise to stand, to serve, and to keep listening, no matter how heavy the storm became. Morning arrived, gray and damp, the remnants of rain clinging to the streets and the stone walls of Alexandria. Elias moved through the library with quiet determination, his eyes scanning shelves, his hands brushing against spines of scrolls as though seeking reassurance. The storm from the night before had left marked small puddles, damp pages, but nothing beyond repair. Still, the tension in the city lingered, invisible yet palpable. Jonah met him near the central hall, eyes wide with concern. "There's talk outside," he said. "Some merchants refuse to sell to families who've taken shelter here. They think we're hoarding resources." Elias sighed, feeling the weight settle across his shoulders. "Then we must be careful, and we must be fair," he said. "Knowledge alone is not enough. Action must follow." Throughout the morning, the library became a hub of quiet strategy. Families, scholars, and city folk gathered to plan, discuss, and exchange ideas. Mara organized tables and benches, ensuring space for everyone, while Elias moved from group to group, listening more than speaking, guiding without commanding. At midday, a young boy approached Elias nervously, holding a small, tattered scroll. "I found this in the market," he said. "I think it belongs to the library." Elias took it gently, recognizing an old text that had been missing for years. "You did well," he said. "This is how knowledge survives, not locked away, but cared for by many hands." As afternoon stretched on, word reached the library that a conflict had erupted at the southern docks. Traders and townspeople argued fiercely, threatening violence. Elias felt a familiar tightening in his chest. He turned to Mara and Jonah. "We cannot ignore this," he said. "If knowledge is to serve, it must meet fear with reason, not silence." They gathered supply scrolls, pens, lists, and ledgers and walked carefully toward the docks. Elias stepped into the crowd, raising his hands to calm the murmurs. "We are here to help," he said. "Let us find solutions together." At first, the mob was resistant, shouting and gesturing. But Elias spoke with patience, asking questions, listening, reminding them that their anger was understood, their fears valid. Slowly, the tide of voices shifted. People began to propose ideas rather than accusations, to plan rather than destroy. By evening, the docks were calmer, not perfect, but cooperative. Elias returned to the library, exhausted, yet his heart felt lighter than it had in days. The old man appeared silently, watching him sit. "You are learning the true measure of wisdom," he said. Elias looked up, tired but resolute. "That knowledge is not just kept, it is lived." Outside, the last drops of rain fell, gentle and cleansing. The city was still fragile, still tense, but in the library, hope had taken root. And as night wrapped Alexandria in shadow, Elias understood that courage was not a single act, but a habit nurtured by patience, guided by heart, and tested by the storms that would always return. The morning was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Elias walked through the library's vast halls, listening to the faint creak of wooden floors beneath his feet. Outside, the streets of Alexandria appeared calm, but he knew the city's silence could be deceptive. Rumors spread faster than rain, and fear had a way of lurking where no one expected. Jonah arrived, carrying a bundle of papers, his expression tense. "Elias, some scholars are threatening to leave," he said. "They claim the library has become too crowded with ordinary people. They say it's losing its purpose." Elias paused, letting the words settle. "Purpose is not fixed," he said slowly. "It grows where it is needed most." Throughout the day, the library became a delicate balance of energy and restraint. Scholars murmured quietly among themselves, curious citizens asked questions, and children explored corners under careful watch. Elias guided them all, sometimes with words, sometimes with gestures, but always with attention. During the afternoon, Mara approached him, concern in her eyes. "The head archivist received a letter," she said, "from the council. They want a report of everyone who has come in. They suspect we're hiding something." Elias frowned. "They don't understand," he murmured. Knowledge is not a weapon, it is a light. And light cannot be counted like coin. He spent the next hour organizing records not to satisfy the council, but to ensure that the library's generosity could be accounted for. Lists of borrowed texts, notes on lessons shared, and details of help given were carefully written. Even as he worked, he felt the familiar pressure in his chest, the weight of responsibility pressing down. By late afternoon, a young woman appeared at the entrance. Her face was pale, and she carried a child clinging to her side. "Please," she said, "I heard you help people. My husband is sick, and we have nowhere else to turn." Without hesitation, Elias led them to a quiet corner, setting them near warm blankets and offering water. As he worked to calm their fears, he realized once more that the library's true purpose was unfolding not in scrolls or texts, but in action. That evening, as Elias walked the aisles alone, the old man appeared beside him, silent at first. "You are carrying more than words now," he said. "I am carrying lives," Elias admitted. "And I do not know if I can hold them all." The old man's gaze was steady. "You are not meant to hold them all. You are meant to guide them, to show the way, and to teach others to carry their own weight." Outside, a gentle rain began, tapping on windows and rooftops. Elias looked up, letting the sound fill him with calm. He realized that storms both of weather and of the heart would always come. But within the walls of the library, choices could be made, courage could be practiced, and wisdom could grow. As night fell, Elias settled at his desk, writing quietly, not for recognition or record, but for the promise that every act of care, however small, added light to the darkness. The library breathed around him, and he understood at last that purpose was not a destination, it was the life lived between storms. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth from the previous night's rain. Elias moved through the library with quiet purpose, checking on scrolls and supplies, but his mind wandered to the city beyond the walls. Alexandria seemed calmer, yet he knew the fragile piece could unravel with the smallest spark. Jonah approached him, excitement and worry mingling in his expression. "Elias, there's talk of a festival tomorrow, a celebration of learning. But some say it should exclude the newcomers, the ordinary people who've come through the library." Elias frowned. "Exclusion is never the way forward," he said. "Knowledge is not a prize. It is a shared gift." He spent the day preparing the library for the event, arranging spaces for scholars, townspeople, and children alike. Mara worked alongside him, her hands steady and sure, placing scrolls within reach and organizing seating so everyone would have a place. As the sun climbed high, a small group of children gathered near the central hall. They held simple instruments, wooden flutes, small drums, and looked at Elias with shy anticipation. "Will you help us play for the festival?" one asked. Elias smiled and nodded. "Music is another way to teach," he said. "Let us practice together." The children played hesitantly at first, their notes wavering. Elias guided them, showing patience and encouragement, and slowly the music found rhythm, a gentle harmony that filled the library with light. By afternoon, the first guests arrived. Scholars whispered quietly among themselves, eyes scanning the space for signs of disorder. But when they heard the music, a strange hush fell over them. Faces softened, shoulders relaxed, and the tension of recent days seemed to lift slightly. The festival began, not with ceremony or speech, but with shared participation. People read aloud, explained ideas, played instruments, and shared small lessons. Elias moved among them, guiding, encouraging, and listening. Jonah and Mara assisted, ensuring that everyone's voice could be heard. Late in the day, the old man appeared, watching from a quiet corner. "Do you see?" he asked softly. "The library is not a building. It is a gathering of hearts, and hearts, when joined, become unshakable." Elias nodded, a quiet warmth spreading through him. He realized that the bridge he had been building extended further than he had imagined, not just between knowledge and action, but between people, young and old, scholar and commoner. As twilight descended, the music softened, and the festival drew to a gentle close. People lingered, exchanging stories and smiles. Outside, clouds gathered once more, and the first drops of evening rain began to fall, light and forgiving. Elias stood at the entrance, listening to the rhythm of rain on stone. He understood now that the library's true power was not in what it contained, but in how it brought people together, teaching them courage, patience, and the quiet strength of shared purpose. And as the rain deepened, he whispered to himself, "This is the path we will continue to walk together." The rain returned at dawn, steady and persistent, tapping rhythmically against the tall windows of the library. Its sound was a gentle drum, soothing yet insistent, reminding Elias that the world outside remained unpredictable. He moved through the aisles, checking on scrolls and supplies, but his thoughts kept drifting to the festival from the day before. Jonah appeared, a scroll tucked under his arm. "Elias, some visitors from the festival have returned," he said. "They want to study further, to understand more." Elias felt a spark of hope. "Then we will teach," he said. "Not just for them, but for anyone willing to listen." Throughout the morning, the library became a hive of quiet learning. Families gathered around tables, children asked questions eagerly, and scholars moved among them, slowly warming to the presence of those they had once considered outsiders. Elias guided the conversations, encouraging curiosity and patience, while Mara helped distribute scrolls and materials. At midday, a knock came at the grand doors. A city official stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a letter. "The council has requested a report," he said, voice firm. "They are concerned about the library's activities." Elias took the letter calmly. "We will provide it," he said. "And we will explain why our work matters." He spent the afternoon preparing the report, not as a formality, but as a testament to the library's role in the community. Every act of help, every lesson taught, every life touched was recorded with care. Jonah assisted, and even Mara contributed notes, ensuring the record was accurate and heartfelt. As evening approached, a sudden commotion erupted near the main hall. A child had wandered too close to a wet stone floor and slipped, falling hard. Elias rushed forward, checking for injuries. The child cried but was not seriously hurt. He comforted the child, teaching others to help, to remain calm, and to act with care. The old man appeared silently, observing Elias as he guided the situation. "Courage," he said softly, is shown in how we respond when small disasters strike, not just the great ones. Night fell, and the rain continued, light and steady. Elias sat by the window, watching drops race down the glass, listening to the distant echoes of the city. He realized that the library had become more than a place of learning. It was a living, breathing part of Alexandria, a refuge, a school, a bridge between knowledge and life. As he unrolled a fresh scroll and dipped his reed in ink, Elias whispered to himself, "Every day is a chance to care, to guide, and to grow. And every drop of rain reminds me of that." The library settled around him, warm and steady, as night embraced the city. Outside, the storm sang softly, and Elias listened, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The city woke under a gray sky, the streets slick with rain that had fallen through the night. Elias moved through the library with quiet determination, sensing a subtle tension in the air. Though the storm had softened, the people of Alexandria seemed restless, their minds still carrying the shadows of fear and uncertainty. Jonah approached, holding a small bundle of notes. "There's talk of another storm," he said. "Not just rain, people fear unrest, shortages, even violence." Elias nodded, understanding more than the words conveyed. "Then we must prepare," he said. "Not to control, but to guide." The morning passed with careful work. Elias and Mara organized the library, ensuring scrolls and supplies were secure, while guiding the children and townspeople in quiet lessons about reading, numbers, and stories from distant lands. Each moment was measured, purposeful, a small act of stability in an unstable world. By midday, a merchant arrived, soaked and anxious. "They say the library favors some families over others," he said. "If this is true, I cannot sell to them fairly." Elias met the man's eyes. "Fairness is not measured by suspicion," he said gently. "It is shown through action. Come inside. See how we work, learn how we help." The merchant hesitated, then entered. He watched families reading, children learning, scholars discussing, and slowly, his expression softened. "I understand now," he said quietly. "It is not about favor, it is about care." Later, a young woman arrived carrying her father, who was ill. She begged for guidance, for knowledge that could help him. Elias spent hours with them, consulting texts, explaining remedies, and showing how to observe symptoms carefully. By evening, they left with hope and instruction. Not certainty, but hope was often the first step toward healing. The old man appeared as twilight fell, his eyes calm and reflective. "You are learning the true purpose of this place," he said. Elias wiped sweat and ink from his hands. "That it is not just a library," he said. "It is a refuge, a teacher, a bridge." Outside, the rain began again, gentle and persistent, washing the city streets with silver light. Elias stood beneath the eaves, feeling the rhythm of drops on stone. Each patter reminded him that storms both of weather and heart would always come. But courage, kindness, and wisdom could hold steady, even when the world seemed to tremble. As night embraced Alexandria, Elias returned to his desk. He unrolled a new scroll and began to write, not copying, not teaching, but recording the lessons of the day. Each word carried the weight of care, the promise of guidance, and the hope that knowledge, when shared, could transform not just minds, but hearts. The morning air was heavy with mist, and Alexandria seemed wrapped in a quiet hush. The streets glistened with lingering rain, and the scent of wet stone mingled with the faint aroma of bread from distant bakeries. Elias moved through the library, noticing small details he had never truly seen before: the curve of a scroll's edge, the gentle tilt of a leaning shelf, the way dust motes caught the soft light like tiny stars. Jonah arrived, carrying a bundle of carefully tied scrolls. "Elias," he said quietly, "some scholars are questioning why we continue to welcome so many people from outside the city. They say it distracts from true learning." Elias paused, his fingers brushing a row of aged scrolls. "Learning is not a competition," he said slowly. "It is a journey that grows stronger when shared." The morning passed with steady work. Elias guided children through exercises in writing and arithmetic, while Mara explained stories of distant lands to families gathered around low tables. Each lesson was simple, yet meaningful, and slowly, the atmosphere in the library shifted from tension to quiet curiosity. At midday, a young man approached Elias, holding a torn page. "I found this in the marketplace," he said. "It looks important." Elias took it carefully, recognizing the delicate script. "You have done well," he said. "Even small acts of care keep knowledge alive." Later, a commotion arose at the southern entrance. A group of townspeople had gathered, voices sharp with frustration. Elias stepped forward, greeting them with calm words. "We are here to help," he said. "We cannot solve every fear, but we can listen, guide, and work together." The crowd hesitated, then slowly followed him inside. Elias led them to a dry space, providing blankets, warm water, and gentle guidance. He spoke quietly, teaching patience and understanding, showing that even anger could be transformed into cooperation when met with compassion. As dusk settled, the old man appeared beside him, watching the library hum with activity. "You are learning the true measure of strength," he said. Elias looked around at the families, scholars, and children working together. "Strength is not in power," he said softly, "but in patience, kindness, and the willingness to act when others cannot." Outside, the rain returned, light and steady, tapping on the stone roof. Elias stood at the library doors, feeling the cool drops on his face, listening to their rhythm. Each drop was a reminder that the storms of life would always come, but courage, compassion, and shared knowledge could shelter more than walls ever could. As night fell, Elias returned to his desk, unrolling a new scroll and dipping his reed in ink. He wrote not for himself, but for those who would come after, leaving words that carried hope, lessons of care, and the quiet reminder that even in uncertainty, action guided by heart could light the way. The city awoke under a pale sky, mist rising from the streets like soft smoke. Elias moved through the library slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than usual. Rain had left pools in the courtyards, and the distant murmur of the harbor reminded him that life in Alexandria never truly paused. Jonah approached, his steps quick, carrying several folded parchments. "Elias," he said, "there are rumors of unrest in the northern quarters. People are scared, and some blame the library for favoring others." Elias sighed, running a hand along a row of scrolls. "Fear grows faster than knowledge," he said softly. And fear demands attention. By midday, the library was bustling with families seeking guidance, children eager to learn, and scholars observing the growing mix of people with cautious interest. Elias moved among them, answering questions, correcting mistakes, and listening with patience, understanding that every small act of care reinforced trust. Suddenly, a man burst through the doors, soaked from the rain, eyes wild with worry. "My neighbor is ill," he cried. "No physician will see him. They say the library might have a remedy." Without hesitation, Elias gathered the man and his neighbor, leading them to a quiet corner. He consulted medical texts, carefully explaining remedies and precautions. Mara brought water and warm cloths, helping Elias calm the sick man's trembling body. Hours passed, and though the man remained weak, hope began to return to his eyes. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows and echoing in the hallways. Jonah peeked out, noting the rising water in the streets. "The storm is returning," he said. Elias nodded. "Then our work will matter even more tonight." As evening fell, a small group of townspeople lingered near the entrance, hesitant to leave. Elias invited them inside, offering warmth, instruction, and comfort. He spoke quietly about courage, patience, and the importance of shared knowledge. Slowly, the tension in their shoulders eased. The old man appeared, silent as ever, standing in the shadows near the central aisle. "You are learning to act not just with your mind, but with your heart," he said. Elias nodded, feeling both exhaustion and fulfillment. "I see now that wisdom is useless if it does not move through life." Rain continued through the night, steady and unrelenting. Elias watched from the library doors, letting its rhythm remind him that storms were inevitable, but compassion, guidance, and courage could stand firm. And as he returned to his desk to write by lamplight, he understood that every choice, every act of care, was part of the bridge he was building, a bridge not only for knowledge, but for hope itself. The morning air was damp and cool, carrying the faint scent of wet stone and distant sea. Elias moved quietly through the library, noting small puddles that had formed overnight and straightening scrolls that had shifted on their shelves. The city beyond the walls seemed unusually still, as if it too were holding its breath. Jonah arrived carrying a bundle of parchments, his expression serious. "Elias," he said, "some merchants and scholars are questioning the library's purpose. They say that too many outsiders are using it and that it has lost its true focus." Elias paused, letting the words sink in. "Purpose is not static," he said. "It grows where it is needed, and today it is needed here." Throughout the day, the library filled with a steady stream of people, families seeking guidance, children eager to learn, and scholars debating ideas. Elias moved among them, answering questions, explaining texts, and guiding them toward understanding. Mara helped organize the space, ensuring everyone had room to work and learn. At midday, a small commotion arose near the entrance. A young woman appeared, carrying her sick brother. "Please," she said, voice trembling, "can you help him? No one else will." Elias quickly led them to a quiet corner, consulting medical texts, explaining remedies, and demonstrating careful observations. Mara brought warm water and cloths, assisting Elias as he guided the woman in helping her brother. Hours passed, but hope slowly returned to their eyes, small yet undeniable. Outside, rain began to fall lightly, tapping the windows in a soft rhythm. Jonah watched the streets, noting the slow rise of water in the alleys. "Another storm is coming," he said. Elias nodded. "Then we must continue to be ready. Our work matters more when fear threatens to take hold." As evening settled, a group of townspeople lingered, hesitant to leave. Elias welcomed them inside, offering warmth, guidance, and instruction. He spoke softly about courage, patience, and the importance of working together, reminding them that knowledge is most powerful when shared. The old man appeared silently, standing near the central aisle. "You are learning the weight of wisdom," he said. Elias nodded, exhaustion pressing against him, but a quiet satisfaction filled his chest. "I see now that knowledge must live," he said. "Not in scrolls, but in the lives it touches." Outside, the rain continued, steady and soothing, reminding Elias that storms, both of weather and of the heart, were inevitable, but that compassion, courage, and guidance could stand firm against them. As he returned to his desk to write by lamplight, he knew that every act of care, however small, was part of the bridge he was building, a bridge not only for knowledge but for hope itself. The morning arrived gray and muted, with mist curling around the streets and damp air clinging to every corner of Alexandria. Elias moved through the library quietly, checking the shelves and straightening scrolls that had shifted overnight. The building felt alive, holding the echoes of past storms and of the people it sheltered. Jonah arrived, carrying a stack of tablets, his expression tense. "Elias," he said, "there are whispers among the scholars. They fear the library is losing control, that the lessons are no longer for the learned, but for anyone who comes." Elias considered the words, brushing dust from a parchment. "Control is not our goal," he said softly. "Guidance is. And guidance requires patience." Throughout the day, the library hummed with quiet activity. Children clustered around tables, learning to write and read. Families pored over maps and diagrams. Scholars debated, their voices careful now, tempered by curiosity instead of arrogance. Elias moved among them, answering questions, offering explanations, and encouraging dialogue that bridged gaps between knowledge and experience. At midday, a young woman appeared at the entrance, carrying her elderly mother, who was weak and feverish. "Please," she pleaded, "I heard the library might help her." Elias led them to a quiet corner, consulting medical texts while demonstrating remedies and careful observation. Mara assisted, offering warm water and cloths, calming the mother's trembling hands. Hours passed, and though the woman's condition remained fragile, hope returned to her daughter's eyes. Outside, the rain began once more, soft at first, then steady, tapping against windows and doors in a constant rhythm. Jonah glanced out the tall windows. "The streets may flood," he warned. Elias nodded. "Then our work becomes even more important. Knowledge alone cannot save, they need guidance, care, and courage." As evening fell, a small group lingered at the entrance, hesitant to leave. Elias invited them inside, offering warmth, instruction, and reassurance. He spoke quietly about patience, understanding, and the power of collective effort, showing them that fear could be transformed into action when met with calm and wisdom. The old man appeared, observing from a shadowed aisle. "You are learning," he said softly, "that wisdom carries responsibility as well as knowledge." Elias nodded, exhaustion heavy but tempered by quiet fulfillment. "I see now," he said, "that the library's true power is not in what it contains, but in how it touches lives." Rain continued through the night, steady and gentle, echoing against stone walls. Elias stood at the doors, feeling the droplets on his face, listening to their rhythm. Every storm, he realized, was an opportunity not just to protect knowledge, but to guide, to care, and to build hope. As he returned to his desk, he unrolled a fresh scroll and began to write, each word a bridge for those who would come after, carrying lessons of courage, compassion, and patience. The morning was quiet, the city wrapped in a pale mist, and the air smelled faintly of wet stone and sea. Elias walked through the library, his steps slow and deliberate, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing against his shoulders. Each shelf, each scroll, seemed to whisper reminders that knowledge alone was never enough. It required care, guidance, and action. Jonah appeared carrying a bundle of fresh scrolls, his expression anxious. "Elias," he said, "some scholars are spreading rumors outside the city. They say the library has become too crowded, that its purpose is being diluted." Elias paused, running a hand along the edge of a shelf. "Purpose," he said, "is not something fixed or owned. It grows where it is needed most, and today it is needed here." Throughout the morning, the library filled steadily. Families arrived seeking guidance, children eagerly clustered around tables, and scholars moved cautiously among them, observing with curiosity and surprise. Elias guided each group with patience, answering questions, correcting errors, and helping them understand that learning was not about status, but about curiosity and care. By midday, a young man arrived carrying a wounded bird in a small basket. "I found it on the street," he said. "Can you help it survive?" Elias nodded and led him to a quiet corner. Together, they cleaned and bandaged the bird's wing, discussing observation, care, and the delicate balance of life. Mara brought warm water and cloths, helping calm the young man and showing him how small actions could have great impact. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. Jonah glanced out the window. "It's coming again," he said. Elias nodded, feeling the familiar rhythm of responsibility settle over him. "Then our work becomes even more necessary. Knowledge is valuable, but only when paired with action and compassion." As evening fell, a small group lingered near the entrance, hesitant to leave. Elias welcomed them inside, offering warmth, instruction, and guidance. He spoke quietly about courage, patience, and the importance of shared responsibility, demonstrating that fear could be transformed into cooperation when met with understanding. The old man appeared, standing in a shadowed aisle, watching quietly. "You are learning the heart of wisdom," he said. Elias looked around at the families, children, and scholars working together. "Wisdom," he said softly, "is not just knowledge preserved, it is knowledge lived, shared, and acted upon." The rain continued through the night, tapping rhythmically against the library's stone walls. Elias stood at the doors, feeling the cool droplets on his face, listening to their steady song. Each storm, he realized, was not merely a test, but an opportunity to teach, to care, and to build hope. Returning to his desk, he unrolled a fresh scroll and began to write, leaving words that would guide, inspire, and remind those who came after that courage and compassion are the true measures of knowledge. The day began with a soft drizzle, the streets of Alexandria glistening under a muted gray sky. Elias moved through the library with quiet intent, checking scrolls and arranging tablets, but his mind was not on the work alone. He felt the weight of expectation pressing upon him, the responsibility of guiding not just knowledge, but lives. Jonah arrived, carrying a small bundle of parchment, worry etched across his face. "Elias," he said, "some scholars are whispering that the library is becoming a place for ordinary folk, not the learned. They question our purpose." Elias paused, letting the words sink in. "Purpose," he said slowly, "is not defined by fear or status. It is revealed through action, through the lives we touch." Throughout the morning, the library filled with families and children eager to learn. Scholars observed, some skeptically, others with cautious curiosity. Elias moved among them, answering questions, demonstrating techniques, and encouraging dialogue. Each interaction was a careful balance of patience and guidance, ensuring that learning remained accessible to all. At midday, a woman arrived, carrying her ailing father. "Please," she said, voice trembling, "we have nowhere else to go." Elias led them to a quiet corner, consulting texts and explaining remedies. Mara assisted, providing warm water and blankets. They worked patiently, teaching the daughter how to care for her father while preserving his dignity. By late afternoon, hope had returned to her eyes, small but steady. Outside, the drizzle grew heavier, tapping softly against windows and doors. Jonah watched, concern in his gaze. "The storm is coming," he said. Elias nodded. "Then our guidance matters even more. Knowledge alone is not enough, it must be paired with compassion and courage." As evening fell, townspeople lingered near the entrance, hesitant to leave. Elias welcomed them, offering instruction, reassurance, and a space for learning. He spoke quietly about patience, understanding, and the importance of working together, showing them that fear could be transformed into cooperation when met with calm and wisdom. The old man appeared silently, standing near the central aisle. "You are learning the essence of leadership," he said. Elias looked around at the people engaged in study, discussion, and care. "Leadership," he said softly, "is not about command, it is about service, patience, and guiding others toward their own strength." Outside, rain continued through the night, steady and persistent. Elias stood at the doors, feeling the droplets on his face, listening to their rhythm. Each storm, he realized, was an opportunity not just to protect knowledge, but to teach, to care, and to build hope. Returning to his desk, he unrolled a fresh scroll and began to write, leaving words that would guide future generations in courage, compassion, and wisdom. The morning was pale and misted, with light rain softening the streets and cloaking Alexandria in a gentle hush. Elias moved through the library, pausing to straighten scrolls and check tables, feeling the quiet weight of responsibility settle upon him like a familiar cloak. Each day seemed to carry new challenges, yet each also brought small victories he could measure in faces, not just words. Jonah arrived, carrying a small bundle of notes and a worried expression. "Elias," he said, "some merchants and scholars are questioning our work. They fear the library favors certain families over others." Elias sighed, brushing his fingers along the edge of a scroll. "True learning," he said, "cannot be limited by fear or prejudice. Our task is to guide, not to control." By mid-morning, the library began to fill with people from the city families, children, and scholars alike. Elias moved among them, listening patiently, answering questions, and teaching lessons not only of letters and numbers, but of observation, patience, and cooperation. Mara helped organize the space, ensuring that each person had room to learn, to ask, and to explore. At midday, a young man arrived, carrying a small injured dog. "Please," he said, "can someone help it survive?" Elias led him to a quiet corner, guiding him through the process of care while explaining the principles behind each action. Mara brought warm water and cloths, helping calm both the young man and the trembling dog. Hours passed, and the animal stirred, a sign of recovery. Elias smiled quietly, understanding that even small acts of care could ripple outward. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the tall windows. Jonah glanced toward the city streets. "The storm may worsen," he said. Elias nodded. "Then we must remain steadfast. Knowledge alone cannot protect. We must act with compassion, courage, and patience." As evening approached, a hesitant group lingered near the entrance. Elias invited them inside, offering warmth, guidance, and instruction. He spoke softly about courage, patience, and the power of shared effort, demonstrating that fear could be transformed into cooperation and understanding when met with care. The old man appeared, standing quietly in the central aisle. "You are learning the true meaning of wisdom," he said. Elias looked around at the families, children, and scholars working together. "Wisdom," he said softly, "is not found only in scrolls or texts. It is revealed in action, in care, and in the courage to guide others gently." Rain continued to fall through the night, steady and unrelenting. Elias stood at the doors, feeling each droplet touch his face, listening to its rhythm. Every storm, he realized, was not simply a trial, but an opportunity to teach, to care, and to strengthen the bridge between knowledge and hope. Returning to his desk, he unrolled a fresh scroll and began to write, leaving words that would inspire courage, compassion, and wisdom for those who came after. The day began gray and heavy, clouds hanging low over Alexandria, and the streets slick with rain from the night before. Elias moved quietly through the library, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility in every step. The library had become more than a place of scrolls. It was now a living space of care, learning, and trust. Jonah arrived, carrying a bundle of parchments with concern etched across his face. "Elias," he said, "there are rumors in the northern quarters. Some people accuse the library of favoring scholars over ordinary families." Elias paused, running a hand along the edge of a shelf. "Knowledge is a light," he said slowly. "It cannot be hoarded, nor should it be restricted by fear. We must continue to share it." Throughout the morning, the library filled steadily. Children gathered around tables, learning letters and numbers. Families explored maps and stories. Scholars observed, some skeptically, some curiously, but gradually, their attitudes softened as they witnessed patience, care, and collaboration in action. Elias moved among them, guiding, teaching, and listening, while Mara helped organize the space to ensure everyone had a place. At midday, a young woman approached with her elderly father, who was weak and unsteady. "Please," she said, voice trembling, "can you help him? No one else will." Elias led them to a quiet corner, consulting medical texts, demonstrating remedies, and teaching the daughter how to care for her father. Mara provided warm water and blankets, calming the father and instructing gently. Hours passed, and though the man remained weak, hope glimmered in their eyes. Outside, the rain began again, steady and soft, tapping against the library windows. Jonah glanced at the streets. "The storm may rise," he said. Elias nodded. "Then our work matters more than ever. Knowledge must always be paired with action and compassion." As evening fell, townspeople lingered near the entrance, hesitant to leave. Elias welcomed them inside, offering guidance, warmth, and instruction. He spoke quietly about patience, courage, and the importance of working together, showing that fear could be transformed into understanding and cooperation. The old man appeared silently, observing from the shadows. "You are learning that wisdom is not merely knowing," he said. Elias looked around at the people learning, helping, and sharing together. "Wisdom," he said softly, "is alive in action, in care, and in the courage to guide others toward their own strength." Rain continued through the night, drumming steadily against the stone walls. Elias stood at the library doors, letting the droplets touch his face, listening to their rhythm. Each storm, he realized, was an opportunity to teach, to protect, and to build hope. Returning to his desk, he unrolled a fresh scroll and began to write, leaving words that would guide future generations in compassion, courage, and shared wisdom. The morning arrived with a soft drizzle, the city of Alexandria wrapped in a muted quiet. Elias walked through the library, his hands brushing over the spines of ancient scrolls, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than usual. The library had become more than a place of learning. It was now a sanctuary for hope, care, and courage. Jonah arrived carrying a bundle of parchments, his brow furrowed. "Elias," he said, "there are whispers outside. Some say the library favors certain families, that knowledge is being given unevenly." Elias paused, letting the words sink in. "Knowledge," he said slowly, "is not a prize to be hoarded. It is a gift to be shared, especially when fear and uncertainty surround us." By mid-morning, the library was alive with activity. Children gathered around tables, practicing letters and numbers. Families explored maps and stories, curious and eager. Scholars moved cautiously among them, some skeptical, others intrigued. Elias guided each group, answering questions, demonstrating techniques, and encouraging dialogue that bridged gaps between knowledge and life. Mara helped organize the space, ensuring that everyone had room to learn and grow. At midday, a young boy appeared, carrying an injured cat in a small basket. "Please," he said, "can someone help it?" Elias led him to a quiet corner, showing him how to care for the animal and explaining the principles behind each action. Mara assisted, bringing warm water and cloths to soothe both the boy and the cat. Hours passed, and the animal began to stir, a small sign of recovery. Elias smiled quietly, understanding that even the smallest acts of care could ripple outward, strengthening bonds and trust. Outside, the rain grew heavier, tapping against the library windows in a steady rhythm. Jonah glanced toward the streets. "Another storm is coming," he said. Elias nodded. "Then our guidance becomes even more important. Knowledge alone cannot protect. It must be paired with patience, courage, and compassion." As evening fell, townspeople lingered near the entrance, hesitant to leave. Elias welcomed them inside, offering instruction, reassurance, and a space to learn. He spoke softly about cooperation, understanding, and the importance of shared effort, showing that fear could be transformed into care when met with guidance. The old man appeared silently, standing in the shadows. "You are learning the true essence of wisdom," he said. Elias looked around at the children, families, and scholars working together. "Wisdom," he said softly, "lies not only in what we know, but in what we do, in how we guide, and in how we care." Rain continued through the night, steady and gentle. Elias stood at the library doors, feeling each droplet touch his face, listening to its rhythm. Every storm, he realized, was an opportunity to teach, to guide, and to build hope. Returning to his desk, he unrolled a fresh scroll and began to write, leaving words that would inspire courage, compassion, and wisdom for those who came after. The night was deep and quiet, the rain falling softly in steady rhythm against the library's stone walls. Elias sat alone at his desk, the flickering lamplight casting long shadows across the scrolls. The city outside was hushed, wrapped in the calm after so many storms, both of weather and of the heart. He looked around the library, seeing the worn shelves, the scattered scrolls, and the quiet spaces where countless lives had been touched. Families, children, and scholars each had come seeking guidance, knowledge, or hope. Each had left a mark, and in turn, the library had left a mark on them. Jonah appeared quietly, standing beside him. "Elias," he said softly, "you've done more than preserve knowledge. You've shown people how to live it." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle gently on his heart. "It was never just about knowledge," he said. "It was about care, courage, patience, and the willingness to act when it matters most." The old man appeared from the shadows, his eyes calm and steady. "You have learned the greatest lesson," he said. "That wisdom is not measured in scrolls, but in hearts touched, lives guided, and hope given." Outside, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, whispering against the stone roof. Elias rose, stepping to the doorway, letting the cool droplets touch his face. The library stood behind him, steadfast and eternal, a testament not only to knowledge, but to compassion, courage, and the power of shared purpose. He turned back once more, glancing over the tables, the shelves, the spaces where laughter, learning, and care had intertwined. A quiet smile formed on his lips. He understood now that every storm, every challenge, every moment of fear had led to this, a place where hearts and minds could grow together, and where hope could endure even in the darkest of times. As the rain continued, soft and persistent, Elias whispered into the night, "This is the way forward, not in isolation, not in fear, but together, with courage, patience, and care." And in the library, the candles flickered, the scrolls waited patiently, and the gentle rhythm of rain carried the promise of tomorrow, a tomorrow where knowledge was lived, hope was shared, and hearts were never left behind. ZZZ, the Great Library of Alexandria will always stand, a bridge between knowledge and life, a sanctuary for courage, and a home for hope. 熟睡符号